I'm back. We're going to talk about Clam Blitz. So, I think there's been a sizable uptick in viewers since I last talked about one of the modes. We're up to Clam Blitz, last of the four. The way I've been doing this is... What I'm trying to demonstrate with this stream is how to fundamentally think about Splatoon. Right? So, I'm talking about Splatoon in terms of the very basics, the fundamentals. Alright? Now, the way we reach the fundamentals is usually just by asking a couple of very simple questions about the game. And in this case, they're so simple that we can actually start from essentially zero knowledge of the mode and then in a matter of minutes get to a stage where we can start to understand how the mode actually plays at a competitive level, at a high level. Do I plan on releasing a doc for the points? Yeah, I'll just put a paste bin up or something. So, I've already done that for every other mode so far, and we've talked about things like map control, the hot zone and splat zones, strongholds and tower control, scramble defense in Rainmaker, and now we're going to talk about Clam Blitz. Now, full disclosure and fair warning, I'm not expecting to get through a whole lot of Clam Blitz, because Clam Blitz is an extremely complicated mode. It's a very good mode once you figure out how to play it, but it's very complicated. It's basically it's as complicated as all three other modes in one. Basically, it has elements of all three modes in one. Controlling the map kind of like zones, pushing the clam into the basket, kind of like Rainmaker, like at one opportunity. Controlling certain parts of the map, like strongholds, kind of like tower control. All of that sort of comes into one with Clam Blitz. So we're going to take a little bit, and by a little bit I mean probably about 20 minutes, judging by how long my notes are here, to start talking about Clam Blitz from the very basics. So, the three questions that we ask about each mode, and I'm going to actually just list them here because it's going to take a while to get through all of them, we're going to lose track otherwise. So the three questions are, how is the objective controlled? How does the objective change over time? And how do you win? And actually, I might just say, how do you win? You score 100 points. Like, this is the kind of level we're starting with, right? How do you win in Clam Blitz? You score 100 points to win. Power clams are worth 20, small clams are worth 3. If you don't score 100 points all at once, then there's a zone-style penalty of 50% of the scoring run that you had. So if you score 20 points all at once, because you just threw a power clam in and that's it, then your penalty would be 10, because that's 50% of 20. Likewise, if you score 80 points, penalty would be 40. And finally, if neither team scores a full 100 points, then the team with the most points at the end of the 5 minutes wins. And of course, if you're talking about NA solo queue, then you go into overtime for 3 minutes when nobody's scored, and the team who scores first at that point, it sort of enters a sudden death mode, where the first team to score wins. So that's how you win in Clam Blitz. So we're going in reverse order here because the second question is really fucking complicated. So how is the objective controlled? So we've got clams spawning around the map. You can see them here. Like, we can see them on Spectator. In order for these to show up this way for players, they need to actually have turf of their color underneath. So all you have to do is touch them to pick them up. Once you've got 10 clams, so you can collect up to 10 clams. Once you have 10, you form a power clam. And you need a power clam in order to break the enemy team's basket. The enemy basket is always located, kind of like tower control, it's always located in the same place every game. It's in the enemy team's base. It depends, like, the difficulty of reaching the basket depends on the map. It depends so much that Clam Blitz is so reliant on the basket placement that essentially each individual map is a very different way of playing Clam Blitz. Oh yeah, I mean, Hitzel, remember, like, when we were first starting out, I kept saying, like, the way that we needed to push was to try and keep the basket open for a long time? and then like gracefully retreat and all that sort of shit. And then turns out that's funny how that works. So where were we? So once you open the basket with the power clam, small clams can be thrown into. So like I said, power clam's worth 20, including the one that breaks the basket. Small clam's worth 3. Okay, so bear with me here. We're about to talk about clam spawns. So how does the objective change over time? Well, let's start with the basic stuff. So once you open the basket, it remains open for 10 seconds unless you score. If you start scoring, then a small amount of that time that has elapsed is replenished. I think it's actually proportional to the amount of time. So, like, if you have 5 seconds left on the basket, it'll recover more than if you had 7 seconds left or something like that. I don't know that for sure. I'm just saying what I think looks to be the case. Once the basket closes, it retracts for 10 seconds. And so the team who's scoring, if they don't keep the basket open, the basket closes and it actually retracts into the pedestal for 10 seconds. And when it does that, it drops a freebie power clam. A lot of people call it the pity clam. I call it a freebie because it's not actually a pity clam at all. It's the point of the freebie is actually to punish bad pushes. It's not to be like, huh, you got pushed in, poor you, here's a freebie power, here's a pity clam to make you feel better. No, the freebie is vitally important for making sure that bad teams who don't know how to push get punished. So, yeah, as I said, the basket's always in the same place. That's really important for later. So, okay, clam spawns. So, this set of clams, this set of clams, and this set of clams are essentially the same every time. So when the game starts, there's going to be 30 clams spread across the map. Usually in groups of about 6. So you can see there's actually 7 here for some reason. That's a bit weird. Oh, there's the 7th here. So it's quite often in groups of 6 or 5, whatever, but sometimes there's weird shit like 7. It's not really, that doesn't really matter. Point is, there's 30 clams, and they're spread out semi-evenly in the same places around the map. And yeah, 7 counts as about 6. And so these are just the initial spawns. Right? So after this point, clams don't really spawn like this ever again. After the initial, like after 12 seconds in, and then every 12 or 4 seconds depending on a certain factor, after that, clams start spawning in groups of 4 all around the map in predetermined locations. So, for example, there might be a spawn here, and then, so this might happen 12 seconds in, and then 12 seconds later there might be a spawn here. These spawns, the game attempts to mirror these spawns once. So if there's a spawn here, the game tries to put a spawn here. It can fail to put a spawn down if there is a player or a clam in this position. So if you're standing here, or if there's an extra power, a small clam, or if there's like still clams left over from the last time, whatever, then this will not actually spawn, and it will pick somewhere else, and it won't actually try this ever again. Like it will randomly, but it only tries to mirror spawns once. So it just kind of keeps the map fair, where like if you have clams on one side, the other side should get clams as well. The spawn rate improves to 4 seconds per spawn instead of 12 when there are fewer than 25 clams on the map. It might be 25 or fewer. Either way, 25 is the magic number. There's also a limit of 50 clams total on the map. And for these purposes, a power clam counts as 1 clam. So if you make a power clam, it's essentially removing 9 clams from this total. So if there's 30 clams on the map and you make a power clam, for the purposes of spawning clams, you can put that number becomes 21 basically. So yeah, so as Hitzel says, there's all sorts of things you can do with clam spawns to manipulate them. If you don't want clams to spawn in a certain position, for example, I think clams can spawn here, and you generally don't want that because they're just not useful to anyone, you might go past here and pick up only 3 and just leave the other one there. Did Prod make... Yeah, I'm not talking about clam manipulation, though. I don't think clam manipulation is terribly useful aside from just denying spawns that are useless to everyone. Clam manipulation, I think, is sort of... It's too optimal, I would say. You can certainly do some useful things with it, but I think I'm not covering that stuff. I'm covering fundamentals. If you find a way to use if you find a way to use the clam manipulation strats, then you can absolutely do it, and it's certainly not going to hurt you. But I actually think that Prod had it backwards. I actually think that you want slow spawns while you're building up for a push, and then fast spawns when you're trying to get back out onto the map. And we can kind of get into that later. I don't think I'm actually not going to talk about that. So the reason I would say that is because the counter pushes in Clam Blitz are a big deal, as we're about to talk about. So counter pushing in Clam Blitz is kind of like counter pushing in Rainmaker. So we just went over that, and counter pushing in Clam Blitz is really, really dangerous. And if you have fast spawns while you're building up for a push, and then you go in, those fast spawns are going to actually work against you. There's going to be a ton of clams out on the map because you've just not only have you maintained fast spawns while you're trying to build up for the push, but you've also ensured them by putting all your clams in the basket. Then the enemy team's going to come out and find a whole bunch of clam spawns all through the map, and we actually see that a couple of times during these sets. I'm not going to make a huge deal about it, but the point is not to shit on Prod's guide, because I think most of it's fine. It's just that sometimes, like, you can very easily engineer scenarios in which he gets it backwards, and for that reason I think it's the strategy itself is too much of an optimization. It's not that Prod's wrong as such, because what Prod's reasoning is fine, it's just that there's more to the game that sometimes undermines that reasoning. Anyway, back to Clam Blitz. Another couple of things, so I already covered the mirroring spawns, and of course you can always throw your clams. You don't, like, throwing clams into the basket isn't an automatic process or anything, you have to actually manually throw them, and that also means that you can pool clams, pass them to your teammates, etc, etc. In terms of small clams versus power clams, obviously small clams, for their sort of value, are worth more. So a small clam is worth 3, a large clam is worth 20, a large clam is worth 20 small clams, which means each clam in the large clam is only worth 2 instead of 3, etc, etc. It's also a lot easier to keep the basket open with small clams, so when you throw a small clam into the basket, like a power clam will fully replenish the 10 seconds, but a small clam, like 2 small clams, will also probably fully replenish the I think, thinking about it now, I think you need 3 small clams to fully replenish the timer. Yeah, as Hetzel says, small clams can be thrown a lot further, so you can also be in different positions to throw the clams in. The power clam is also... So the power clam is always visible on the map no matter what. So whether it's at your basket, or just dropped somewhere, or someone's holding it, if someone's holding it, the power clam actually glows for the enemy team. If you die while holding clams, a power clam will remain yours. The enemy team can't pick your power clams up. And not only that, but it drops as a power clam, so there's no clams lost in that situation. However, if you have a stack of small clams following after you, no more than 4 clams can drop after you die. And so, like, if you have 9 clams following you, then 5 clams will just disappear, and the other 4 will drop. And of course, those clams are neutral. The enemy team can pick those up. Any clam that's discarded by a player, that is a power clam or a normal clam, any clam discarded by a player despawns after 10 seconds as well. So 10 seconds is sort of the magic number in Clam Blitz, you might notice. And so if you drop a power clam or if you drop a normal clam, 10 seconds later those clams will despawn. The clams that are just starting on the map will just last the entire game if nobody touches them. And also a small thing, if you use certain specials, that is baller or splashdown, then your clams will sort of explode and fan out around you. So you can't, like, explode with a baller and then keep your clams with you. That's just a small thing though. So generally speaking, we can already see that small clams are really good for scoring because you don't need to commit a full power clam. The other team doesn't know where you are, so it takes them a while to react to you. You're trying to... Generally as well, when you're stacking up a bunch of power clams, you're not really trying to take fights while holding those clams. You're more like, okay, I'm either in mid and kind of holding the mid, and so I'm just building up a stack of clams so I can be ready to push. You're not really taking fights at that point. And if you're under the basket, you're probably throwing clams into the basket at that point. And if you're fighting these guys, you probably already dumped your clams and you're waiting for someone else to throw their clams in, and then someone else is going to come in, etc. Oh yeah, I didn't mention that either, but yes, you can super jump with clams. The downside, of course, is if you super jump to spawn, the clams will break, including the power clams. But just jumping normally will not break clams. It's only the spawn barrier that like I said, there's so much to Clam Blitz just talking about how the mode works. This whole section of like just the asking these basic 3 questions took about 5 minutes in the other modes. It's fucking in Clam Blitz we're still going. Like there's so much shit to talk about in just the way the mode works. But we'll get through it. So yeah, small clams are nicer for actually just tacking on points, but of course you need a power clam in order to open the basket. Power clam also is a really good sort of way of burst scoring, so like if it's a bit of a dicey situation and you don't really have time to throw in all your clams, making a power clam can also make it so that, yeah, you don't get quite as much efficiency out of your clams, but you do at least get a fuck ton of points. Okay. We're done talking about the 3 basic questions. This only took like 2-3 minutes per mode before this, and now we've got a whole shit ton of whatever. So, what we normally do at this point is we start to take some of the things we've just been talking about, Supros. We take some of the things we've just been talking about, and we start to understand the game a little bit more based on the answers to those questions. So, straight away, we already know, just from the length of those answers, that Clam Blitz is complicated as all hell. And it's a multi-stage objective as well, right? So before, when we asked, like, okay, how do you win the game? It was just put Rainmaker on pedestal, or put tower at goal. Not really much to it. In Clam Blitz, it's open the basket, put some clams in the basket. You need a power clam to open the basket, but small clams can score well in the basket too once you've opened the basket. And then once the basket closes, there's a penalty, and like all this sort of shit, right? So we see straight away, Clam Blitz is complicated as hell. What it's actually telling us is there's a couple of stages to this objective. And I break it down into gathering clams and depositing clams. You can think of it kind of like an investment. Your time in mid is spent gathering clams, and then you have some kind of setup that lets you get into the basket, and you deposit the clams that you gathered in mid. Right? Now, I want to just point out, before people start getting really nitpicky about this idea, these 2 stages are not discrete. That is to say, you can gather and deposit clams at the same time, you can prepare to deposit clams without having enough for a power clam, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Point is, it's not just gather clams, then deposit clams, and then you're done. There's 2 sort of phases to it, and you have to respect both of them. So part of your strategy needs to cover gathering the clams. How do you gain map control? How do you gather how do you put your clams together and all that? And then how do you actually open the basket and put those clams in the basket and score? Hitzel is, so Hitzel just said it's splat zones where you need to play convoluted Rainmaker to cash in your points. Yes, that is actually accurate. Because a lot of the mode actually resembles splat zones while you're just in the sort of mid gathering clams and whatever, except that you then have to, in order to score, you have to actually put those clams in the basket at some point. So I didn't go into detail about this at the time, but clam spawns tend to be spread around the map in more or less. I don't actually know the exact spawn points. I just know they're sort of in these kind of areas. So like these spawn points are sort of spread around the map, right? I know there's one there. I think there's one top mid. They're spread around the map, which means that in order to gain control, and even the initial clams, in order to gain a bunch of clams and put them together for a push into the basket, you need to have a lot of map control. You need to control a very large part of the map. You need to actually physically go to these places. It's different. It's similar to Splat Zones in that sense, but it's different because all you need to do in order to make use of this map control is just pick up is just touch the clan to pick it up. Alright, good night, Bob. So you don't actually need to hold these areas for a long time, you just need to hold them for long enough to pick up the clams. So again, it's kind of like a cross between the zones, just map control all over the place, plus instantaneous control, kind of like Rainmaker. So, and just in general, having good control of the map is just going to generally increase your clam count. So you might not necessarily ever, like, you know, if you're in mid, you're not going to pick this spawn up, right? Because it's just in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to get back there, but you will still be exposed to this spawn and this spawn and this spawn and this spawn, and you know, like you'll have plenty of spawns to work with. Well, I mean, Hitzel, if 9 mains of swim speed helps you gain control of the map, then sure, use it. Okay. Now we're going to talk about opening the basket. Oh boy, we're barely fucking... Okay, yeah, I'm barely scratching the surface with Clam Blitz, but I just want to introduce it so we can fucking talk about it. So opening the basket can be done in a lot of ways. There's 4 in particular that we're going to talk about. So the first one is to, if I just clear this, first one is to sort of gradually gain control, just encroach toward the basket, and then at some point your map control includes the enemy team's basket, and then you open it and start scoring. This is a really slow way of pushing, but it's a very consistent way of pushing if you can manage it. Generally speaking, you'll sort of like gradually gain control of the map, and then you'll sort of have like a last burst of just like something that gets you over the edge and gets you into the enemy team's basket. This is a lot easier on some maps than others. Mako Mart, for example, you don't have to actually get very far out of mid to control the enemy team's basket, whereas something like Manta Maria, the basket is really deep into the enemy team's base, so you can't really do this as effectively. So right away we're starting to see, like I said before, each map is very different in Clam Blitz. Each map essentially plays like its own mini mode, essentially. I think I just said essentially twice in the same sentence. I'm starting to get a little bit... So yeah, you're gaining control, and then you're at the basket and you start pushing it. So this doesn't always work. It's a map-dependent thing, but if it does work, and if you can manage it, it's a really good way of scoring, because what it is essentially doing is you're not investing a lot of resources into getting to the basket and keeping it open and opening it. Instead, you can use all those resources to keep the basket open. So in this case, you might think of bubbles, for example. Like you get to the basket. Like you've probably had these games where you open the basket and then you realize, oh shit, I've got bubbles. I can just like put these bubbles like here and here and here or whatever, and the enemy team has this nightmare of a time even getting to the basket to defend it, let alone killing the people who are scoring clams. So that's the sort of thing you should keep in mind when you think about this kind of push. Is this gradual kind of thing, and then you get to the basket, and hey, you've still got a ton of resources left over, so you just keep the basket open super easily. Nobody's really dying. The enemy team can't even get close. Super easy. But it's very slow, and you have to be really disciplined. If you start dying on the way in, then all of your work is means nothing. So you have to actually be able to keep everyone more or less alive while you're going in, and then you have a ton of clams and you score. If you can do this, it's a really good way of scoring, but it's hard to do. It's hard to do in that you need to be disciplined. It's not hard to do in that it's like the game makes it hard or anything like that. Yes, Baller, if you're going to use Baller in Clam Blitz, ideally you want to use it after the basket is open, and you want to use it as a way of preventing the enemy team from getting to the basket, rather than allowing your team to jump. Yes, and it's something like that. There's like a full table of like, special advantages, this, and this, and this, and this, and whatever. I'm not going to go into that. I could talk about what's important there. Just remember that making a power clam is generally a good thing for you, but only the one. Yeah, like essentially what I'm saying is this is your ideal push. Is you get to the basket without expending too many resources, and you have all your resources available to just like set up around the basket so people can just come in and out, freely throwing clams in, no threat whatsoever, and you're just here. Like, you're in, nobody can do anything about it. Another one is, so I'm about to talk about free pushes when the enemy team wipes. You can gain you can do the first kind of push if the enemy team wipes, if they kind of feed. Like, if the enemy team runs in and dies and you don't have to do anything to really make them die, then you can score off that really easily, and it's essentially the same thing as just gradually gaining control, except the enemy team gives it to you instead of you having to gain it. The second kind of push is more of like a fighting kind of push, where you actually go and hunt the enemy team down and kill them in order to then get to the basket. The difficulty with this push is that it's really, like, instead of getting to the basket and having all your resources, instead what you're doing is you're using all your resources to, like, kill the enemy players, and then you get to the basket, you have no resource to actually keep the basket open, and the enemy team can respawn and come in and start fighting you. So these are the kinds of pushes you quite often see in Western games, is everyone gets kills, everyone goes to the basket, dumps their clams in, the respawners come out and just clean up everyone from their base. Another kind of push that, again, you'll see a lot in the West is the all-in push. The all-in resource investment push, that is, not the all-in suicide jump. We're going to talk about that in a sec. So the all-in push would be something like launch tent this way, put bubbles on tent, stand in bubbles, throw all your clams into the basket, and then when the bubbles pop and the tent disappears, everyone who's standing in these bubbles dies. Right? So this is a brute force push, where you do something that the enemy team basically can't stop, so that the enemy team basically can't stop you from scoring without doing something crazy. So with the bubbles here and the tent shield here, nobody behind this line is getting shot by the enemy team unless someone actually comes out and, you know. Now, there's a couple of things that there's a couple of weaknesses in this push. The first, blunt force trauma. The first one is you aren't getting picks on the defensive team by doing this. You're just hardcore pushing, tunneling the objective. So, you go in with the tent, you start throwing clams in, but all 4 defenders are still alive, and they're just kind of patiently waiting for your bubbles to fuck off so that they can finally go in and kill you. The other thing is that there's no real sustain for the push. It's not really all in terms of suicidal. It's just all in the sense of, like, you use your resources to get in and you throw your clams in, but you can't have people get more clams and then put them into the basket with this kind of push. This push is one and done. All the clams that you have, you brute force and you throw them in the basket. So there's some clear weaknesses here, but sometimes, depending on the map, this is the only way you can really guarantee a push. So Manta Maria is the example I used before of, like, where the first kind of push, the gradual control gain, doesn't really work. This is the kind of push you would do on Manta Maria, where you can't really get a setup because it's, like, the map doesn't really let you do that. So instead, you push up with a bunch of clams and, like, a tent shield and a bunch of bubbles and whatever, and everyone goes in, throws the clams in, and then just jumps out. Or runs away or whatever, depending on the map. And then the fourth kind of push sounds something like, I'm ballering in! Jump now! Jump now! Jump now! Jump now! Jump now! Fuck, we all died. So, there's that. So all 4 of these pushes have some merit. Some more than others. The baller suicide jump to the baller thing is really bad unless it will instantly win you the game. Because, like, it's exactly the kind of push that the freebie is supposed to dissuade. If not for the fact that the West uses the freebie completely wrong. We'll get to that. So the sort of suicide jumps to the like, if you don't win the game by doing that, you give the enemy team a free wipe, you give the enemy team a free clam, and you give them complete uncontested map control for them to do whatever the fuck they want. Not only do they get to do whatever the fuck they want, they actually get a jump start on the first kind of push, the gradual control gain into the basket and then using resources to get the basket open. That's the kind of push that you get punished with by a decent team in Clam Blitz. Were one to exist. So of course the weakness of the gradual control method is that it's not always feasible. You can't, like, you can do it on this map, you can't really do it on, like, Manta Maria. You can't really do it on, what's another one? Walleye is sort of one. It's very difficult to, like, get in and keep control of Walleye. without like a serious overcommitment from the enemy team. It's kind of difficult on... yeah, Arowana, I think, is one. Because on Arowana you can't, like... You can't really kill people in the... Or rather, stop people from, like, getting ready to defend or anything like that. You're sort of stuck in the low ground. There's nothing really you can really do. Blackbelly, I don't think so. Ignore the free power clam. Not due to how long it takes the timer to reset, but yes. You're correct, but not for that reason. A lot of the time the freebie, the strength of the freebie, as we'll get to in a second, is actually just the fact that it's there, not actually using it. Generally speaking, the reason why these baller pushes keep working is because Western teams keep fucking picking up the freebie. Stop doing that. Leave it there. Just don't touch it. Leave it there. Okay? Stop. Yes. So, Arowana, yes. A lot of the time, the Blunt Force Trauma push is what's used, either through the alley or through the grate, straight into the basket. Because taking control of Arowana, you can get control of the basket, using, like, you can shark it and whatever, but generally speaking, the other team is going to be able to at least get some kind of setup started. So you can't get past the basket, right? You can't get this area, you can't get the equivalent of this kind of area on Arowana Ball. You can only really control, like, this kind of area. Strength is when you get... No, not at all. No. We'll get to it. I'll explain it. You sort of get points for guessing, but not really. Counter pushes are really, really powerful in this mode. Similar to Rainmaker. Same reason as Rainmaker, actually. Which is that the enemy team generally has to commit at least somewhat to get into the basket. It's different from Rainmaker because in Rainmaker someone is guaranteed to die because obviously the Rainmaker carrier is going to die at some point. Whereas in Clam Blitz that's not the case. But if people do die, then the same reasoning in Rainmaker applies to Clam Blitz, which is it's very easy to get across the map very quickly. You're only restricted by your swim speed, which means you just straight across. So you straight across. And so you pick up all the clams along the way, and you are able to get straight to the basket, get all your resources in position to keep the basket open, and then you just pile your clams in. Or you don't pile your clams in, you gradually throw your clams in just to keep it open while your resources are still there, gain more resources, like cycle your resources, cycle your clams, keep the enemy team away from the basket, and you just win within about 30 seconds. Right, so these are counter pushes, and they're very reliable. So your pushes must not allow for this to happen. And finally, yeah, the all-in brute force push, as we said, is for like when the basket's really hard to get to. Sometimes you just have to do it. It's also less vulnerable to counter pushes. Like I said, you can kind of get a wall up with like words. You can get a wall up with like a tent shield, bubbles, whatever. But then you can also get out, and that's the key thing. Is, yes, you're all in the sense that you can only really get the clams that you have in, but that's it. But that's also fine because you can get out as well. So generally speaking, if you're going to do like a baller-style push, you should instead be going for something more like a bubble push or a tent push or whatever, where you go in, put your clams in, and get out safely. You don't stand here and just die, because, like, you don't super jump in and then throw the things in unless there's like a lot of cover for you. So we're going to talk about kills a little bit here. So in every mode, but Clam Blitz as well, kills are not the priority. When you're making a play, your objective should not be just to get a kill on someone. In every mode it's different. In zones, the objective of your players should be to gain control, gain map control. That can mean getting kills, a lot of the time it doesn't. In tower control, your players need to be to control the strongholds. If you don't know what a stronghold is, I suggest going back and taking a look at the VOD where I talk about tower control. Trust me, it's a lot more in-depth than the Clam Blitz one, just because tower control is so much simpler. In Rainmaker, what matters is being able to keep the Rainmaker from advancing, or to secure the Rainmaker advancing if we're talking about pushing. So what matters is whether the Rainmaker can move. In Clam Blitz, what matters is being able to hold onto your clams, essentially. So when you're scoring, jumping in and throwing all your clams in, it's kind of like with Rainmaker. Like how I said with Rainmaker, where if you have control of an area, the Rainmaker is going to push that area for free. Tower Control is the same thing. Clam Blitz is the same thing. If you have control of the basket, you can score those clams whenever you want. You don't have to just run in and pile them all in. This is sort of what Rado was saying when, like, he's saying, oh, people will just stand on the basket and throw all their clams in. There's this kind of urgency of, we have to throw our clams in now. No, you don't have to do that. If the basket's open and at least one person is able to score, you can keep the basket open however you like. You instead want to stay safe. You get in, you have a bunch of clams. The first thing you do is you check to see if it's safe to throw the clams in. Right? And you see, oh, hang on, there's a guy up here and he's being shot at. It's actually more of a thing on the demise set. We'll get to that. You see if you can cover your teammate. You see if you can, like, gain a better position. Right? So you don't just go up to this little spot here and throw clams in. You might, for example, think, the basket's open for a while. The enemy team seems to be focusing their defense on this part of the map. So perhaps what we should do is, I've got time, I'm just going to go up through here and score clams over here. And then they might rotate over to this side because I started scoring clams over here, but then I'm going to walk back and my teammate is going to come in through here, and now these guys have vacated this position, he's going to throw in clams from here. That's how you should be scoring your clams. Times the suicide score for a reason. Sort of. If you're going to instantly win the game, yes. Otherwise, be patient. Chill. Your chance will come. Kind of like bait and switch, yeah. It's not even necessarily just bait and switch. Like, you weigh up the situation. You don't. When you come in with a bunch of clams, the first thing you should do is see what the you just see what the situation is and how you should address it. You do it as though you're coming in to just help with the spawn camp or whatever. And then when you see an opportunity and you think, oh, I should probably throw some clams in now, you just stay safe the whole time. Throw your clams in when you get that opportunity to do so. You don't throw your clams in first thing, and even when you are throwing clams in, you only throw like 2 or 3 in. Maximize the timer again. Check the situation again. Maybe people have rotated. Maybe there's a fight about to happen. Maybe you need to back up a little bit and just kind of chill. Maybe these guys, like this is again. You score over here. These guys start rotating, and you throw 2 clams in, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to walk backwards now because these guys are going to rotate. I can see it. They're rotating. I'm going to get away before they catch me. And then this guy, and then this player, who also has clams, assesses the situation as well and sees, oh, these guys are just rotated away, that means I can actually use this position and drag them back. And then this guy assesses the situation again and sees, oh, this guy's scoring now, and these guys have now started shooting this guy, which means that I can now come back in and start scoring again. Like, it's bait and switch in this case, but you can do it a whole bunch of different ways. Yeah, I did, sort of, Hitzel. So, that's how you actually, when you have the basket open, safety first. Right? No point you going in and dying just to get a couple of clams in. It's not worth it. Someone dying. Oh, we're going to talk about the freebie at some point. In a second. Not quite, Hitzel. That is one way of using it, but that's not what the freebie's for. Okay. So, when you're scoring, if someone else is scoring, remember you can hear this, like there's a sound effect. You hear the clam thing ticking. Like clunk, clunk, clunk. Someone else is scoring. You don't need to score at that point. Because your clams, they're safe in your hands, you're not going to die, so you can just chill. And you can be like, alright, this guy's scoring, let's cover him. Let's figure out where he is. So where might this guy be scoring? You should be listening to your teammates and actually sort of figuring out where they are, but say it's solo queue and you're just trying to apply some of this stuff to your solo queue games. You might think, okay, Oh, my teammate's over here. Alright, so I need to cover this guy. So I'm coming in with a bunch of clams, and so I'm over here. It's not really the best place to cover him, but maybe I can... Maybe I spot this guy who's over here. Like, maybe there's someone rotating, and I can maybe kill this guy. Or I can throw a bomb up there. Or I can, maybe even use a booyah bomb, right? Like, maybe I'm a K-Pro. I use a booyah bomb up here or something. Right, that's the sort of thing you do first. You come in, assess the situation, see who's scoring, see if you can cover them, and then from there, if you can't cover them, you at least use them as the bait and switch, like Jiggles was just saying in chat. Now, we're going to talk a bit about power clams here, and there's not going to be too much more to my spiel about Clam Blitz, because frankly, there's just too fucking much. We're going to talk a bit about power clams. So, I think one of the other mistakes that the West makes is with regard to power clams. People don't actually understand when to make power clams. The best time for you to make a power clam is when you reach this position right here, or this position, like whatever, scoring position. The best time for your power clam to exist is here. Right? The next best time is sort of like back here. The further away from the basket you are when you make your power clam, the worse it is for you. The other caveat being, if you're on the way in and you sort of build your power clam by collecting some clams here and then move in, that's also fine. It's just, you have to have control of the basket. Yeah, Hitzel, sort of. You have to... I'll put it another way. The time when you want to make a power clam is when you have control of the basket and you're able to actually score. Right? This is mostly with regard to the first kind of push that I mentioned before, the gradual push. Sometimes it's obviously not that simple. But generally speaking, if you're, like, back here, you don't want a power clam. Because it's... In order to gain map control, when you're sort of back at this kind of line here, you need to have a lot more freedom with the way you move. So if you've got a giant power clam telling the enemy team where you are, you can't really make moves for map control. The anchor can hold one by all means, but most of your players can't be holding power clams at this point. You need to just have whatever clams you can find, and then you need to be making moves to gain map control. Again, you're not really taking fights at this point, you're gaining map control. So if you're only going to gain map control and you're not really taking too many risks, it doesn't really matter if you have 6 clams because you're not going to lose them. The idea is you don't ever take a fight, you're not under any threat. Yes, Prism Haze, that's correct. Now, there is one caveat with power clams, which is that obviously the reason this is a problem is because when you have a power clam, it allows the enemy team, the defending team, to focus their defense. So, if you look at, for example, a power clam like over here, right? The enemy team is going to already have people starting to move over to this direction and starting to kind of get ready to defend from here, whatever. They're not going to be too focused over here because they know that the power clam's over here, and as long as the power clam's over here, they're just going to kind of keep it locked back with this kind of defensive line, and they'll be fine. Now, on one hand, that can be really annoying for the pushing team because it means that you can't really, you can't sneak a power clam in. Once you've made a power clam, the ability to sneak in this direction or whatever, you can't do that by yourself. You have to actually have someone else do that for you. So if you make a power clam, stealth is off the table. However, what you can do is use the power clam as misdirection. And this is the reason why you only really want 1, maybe 2, depending on the map. Again, this all depends on the map. Clam Blitz is very map dependent. If you make 2 power clams, then there's only really 2 places you can go in anyway. Right, so it's not really that you're splitting the defense at this point. So if you make 2 power clams and have 1 stand here and 1 stand here, you're not really splitting the defense. They're defending in the same places anyway. And you're not really able to force rotations. However, if you only have the 1, then they're more likely to focus their defense on just the places where that 1 power clam can go. So that could potentially open up this area for a flank with someone who doesn't have power clams to get in. maybe you jump to them, maybe they just get kills and secure this area, whatever. Objective, remember, is map control. You're trying to gain map control, especially if you can gain map control around their basket. So if you use a power clam to sort of cheat map control by sort of forcing the other team to start looking at you, and then your teammates like use that as a distraction, that can work too. You'll find at higher levels this doesn't work as well, but it still does. It is still a thing. Same thing as Rainmaker, same thing as tower control. Like, you still have to pay some attention to the objective, no matter how good you are. And so even if you are watching your flank, chances are they're going to be less. The flanks are going to be less, or more vulnerable than normal. So, in other words, if you're going to make a power clam early, it should be to use the power clam to drag the defenders around, kind of like Rainmaker. If you're not going to use it for that purpose, don't bother. Just get small clams, because you would be better served by gaining map control the old-fashioned way. It's bait. All right, now we're going to talk about the freebie. Not a whole lot to say, just that most people don't use it right. First thing, don't pick the fucking freebie up. Holy hell. In Japanese solo queue at least, picking the freebie up at the wrong time actually loses games. And so, if you pick the freebie up and are not immediately able to use it to make a push, it does two things. Rather than, like, normal power clams, when you just have a normal power clam, you just made it from clams on the map, then yeah, it highlights your position, and you can use it to sort of drag people around, but that's about it. Right? If you aren't using it for the purpose of dragging people around, making a power clam early generally doesn't do a lot for you. Using the freebie is basically worse in every way. What the effect that the freebie has when it's under your basket is that you have the threat, the same threat as normal, of having a power clam move into the enemy base. The difference is that the enemy has no information as to where that power clam might go, because it's sitting at the basket. At any point, they don't necessarily know, but at any point, someone could grab the freebie and jump to someone who's in behind the basket, or someone could get in with like 9 clams, and someone could grab the freebie and jump. Someone could pick up the freebie on the respawn and move straight across the map. You don't know anything about how this freebie is going to be used as long as it's sitting down here. The reason you don't ever pick it up is because if you touch it, it despawns. It's guaranteed to despawn unless you somehow manage to push into the basket straight away. And generally speaking, unless that is a near certainty in the next couple of seconds, it's a complete waste of the freebie to be able to do that. Not only are you giving up a perfectly good power clam, you're also giving up I almost said pressure. You're also giving up the effect that the freebie has on the enemy team, which is they have to account for the fact that at any time they can get backdoored, which means they are much more restricted in the way they move. Think of it this way. When you're moving around the map in Clam Blitz, and the other team has a power clam, you can't really stray too far away from that power clam. So, like, again, power clam here, you can't really use this part of the map too much. Right? You can't... You can sort of do it, but, like, if you start moving in here, and the other guy's over here, it's sort of like... If something happens to your team at this point, the power clam's free, and you're just in the middle of nowhere. That effect is essentially what you feel with a freebie in play, except there's no power clam on the field. So you have no information as to where the enemy team is aside from the usual information they would normally give you. And you don't know where the push is going to come, but the push is still possible. It's not like normal. Normally, if there's no freebie here and there's no power clam on the field, there is no push that's possible. You can play free. But when the freebie is in play, and the other team has a decent amount of mid control, you don't know where the push is going to come. You have to actually spread your defense. And then when you actually use the freebie is essentially you pick it up and you cross the map and score with it. If you pick it up and don't score with it in the next couple of seconds, you're probably using it wrong. So remember what I said. Picking the freebie up at the wrong time in high-level games is actually throwing, because you remove that ability, that threat of actually being able to score. And if the enemy team freely is able to start moving in and gaining control back, because they now know exactly where the scoring is going to come from, then that picking up the freebie is what has caused that freedom for the enemy team, and that freedom then makes it so that they can start pushing in much more aggressively and start actually cutting you off and getting kills. Right? Picking up the freebie causes this. Picking it up, just picking it up, causes this. Especially when it's like, you know, you've just, like, they've just finished scoring and someone just stands under the basket to pick up the freebie with nobody actually, like, in mid or anything. Yeah, I mean, I was under the impression that the freebie actually gives special advantage. I was under the impression it actually acts as a clam under your control for the purposes of special advantage. I could be wrong on that. The special advantage in Clam Blitz is really confusing. I don't remember it, actually. Not unless you hold it? Alright. I remember there being a reason why I thought that, and I think it might have just been like I watched a video or something that was misleading. But yeah. But yes, so you only ever pick up the power clam if it's about to be scored, generally. Yeah, there's like the special advantage thing. It's like there's 3 different things. Anyway, no, it's not a detriment, soldier. I'm saying the best place for the freebie is right here. As long as it's here, nobody's carrying it, but the effect of having a power clam on the map exists. And as soon as you pick it up, you'd better do something good with it. Like, using it correctly is to leave it under the basket and then play under the knowledge that these guys have to respect it, right? Yes, Dark Pro. Dark doesn't even fucking play Splatoon, dude. Like, come on. Yeah, so Sendo, I agree that you should make one power clam, but I think you shouldn't pick up the freebie. The freebie puts so much, gives you so much strength in just fighting around the mid. Making a power clam, I agree, it's a good thing. You should definitely make one power clam. As to what you do with it, ideally you should try to time the power clam so that you've at least got some chance of like making an inroad with it. So like, I would, for example, try to make a power clam and then immediately walk up here and just see what's going on, right? So I've made the power clam, but they're only just reacting to it. Yeah, possibly, Sendo. I don't know. I might have been rambling a bit. But, so yeah, for example, the way I would do it is, if I'm going to make a power clam, I'm going to try and make the power clam sort of in sort of this kind of vicinity, and I'm going to immediately I'm just going to probe their defense, right? Yeah, Lily, I guess my point is, I would prefer, if you're going to try and use a power clam to pressure the enemy team when you've already got a decent amount of mid control, you should be able to make a power clam with the clams in mid, and then that means that you still have this freebie in reserve. That's basically what I'm saying. So the freebie, yeah, if you need to pick up the freebie to do that, then yeah, you do that. Like, I'm not saying that you always, like, you never ever touch the freebie. The freebie is still really powerful because it's still 20 points. It's still like a way to open the basket, whatever. But if you're just picking the freebie up straight away, don't fucking touch it. Like, don't, yeah, exactly. If you don't know exactly what you're doing with this thing, and you don't have and you're not about to immediately make use of it, don't do it. Don't touch it. Let someone else pick it up who knows what they're doing. Or, well, actually, American Solo Queue, you probably want to pick it up anyway, because otherwise someone will pick it up and not know what they're doing with it. But yeah, so like I said, if I'm going to make a power clam, I'll usually just immediately try to like probe the enemy defense, and then I'll like back up or whatever. But like I wouldn't be committing to this push by making the power clam. I just go and see what the response is, and then like if I can like drag some people away and make them overcommit, thinking that I'm actually going in, then yeah. How do you use the freebie correctly? It's real simple. You leave it here for most of the time. Then, if there is an opportunity to say jump in with it, or you've got the setup and you've got someone dies and respawns, they go and pick it up and jump in and throw it in. You pick it up if you absolutely desperately need a power clam right now, essentially. But aside from that, what it's doing here is essentially it's acting like a fifth player, right? And as long as this power clam is here, you have 5 players on the map. Essentially, that's what it's doing. And it's not quite that. Freebie. It's a. Oh no. Respawn, grab it, jump in, throw it in. Yeah, that's a decent way to use it. But you shouldn't. What I'm saying is, don't just pick the thing up and not have any idea what to do with it. Essentially, okay, soldier, to like, when do you jump in with it versus, I'll put it another way. You shouldn't go back for the freebie if it's going to compromise your push, right? The freebie is 20 points. Is that 20 points worth what? If you, for example, okay, picture this. You're getting ready to push in, enemy team's kind of fucked up, you're kind of in position to start throwing your bubbles and whatever, and someone says, I'm going to go from here back and get the freebie, right? I would say don't do this. If it means that the freebie never gets into this basket on this push, I would say that's fine. Right? Because this, like, don't do this. Don't go back and get the freebie and compromise your push. It's better to have the clams in mid that you already control, go in, and put the clams in the basket, and then, oh, well, shit, we couldn't get the freebie into the basket, but that's fine because we still have the power of the freebie on our side. And of course, yeah, if you die and respawn and you can grab the freebie pretty much for free and just jump straight in, absolutely. Definitely do that. But, again, like, it's 20 points. All this freebie represents, when you put it into the basket, is 20 points. Right? If going back and getting this freebie just to get an extra 20 points in costs you, like, 26 points because you come back here and you hold 26 points. I don't know how that can happen. 27 points because, like, you come back here holding 4 clams and you grab the freebie, so these 4 clams drop on the ground and don't mean anything. And then because you aren't in here, someone dies before they can put their 5 clams in. That's 9 clams that haven't gone in because you went back to get the freebie and you didn't need to. Yeah. No, it's not that you try to use it. It's not that you have to use it. Like I said, if you push in and open the basket, start scoring, and the freebie just sits at your basket, that's honestly fine. I actually think that if it comes down to someone going back and getting the freebie versus just leaving the freebie and having to use it for the next time, absolutely leave it at the basket. Yeah, Prism. Exactly. That's another good way of putting it. The freebie is on our side. Oh my gosh, I hope that's autocorrect, Ross. Either way, that's hilarious. The freebie. Alright, well that's all I wanted to talk about with Clam Blitz. As I think most players already know, there's way more to Clam Blitz than just what I spoke about there. But remember, we're just talking about fundamentals here. We're not talking about specific strategies, we're not talking about any of that, we're just talking about how do these modes work? How do you win these games? Oprah Bees, of course. Fucking hell. So yeah, we're just talking about how the mode ticks. And in terms of the freebie, I just wanted to include the freebie because I think people just use it really wrong, and the freebie is a core part of... Did I talk about spawn camping in zones? No, but I think I might get a chance to talk about it while we're watching the finals. Anyway, okay, let's talk about this shit show of a game. Alright, so... I said I was watching Kiva's stream when this happened, and I said basically, like, I just hate this comp. I really don't like this comp from KP. So, what it's sort of supposed to do is... It's supposed to do that kind of encroaching thing. The first kind of push, remember? Of, like, you gradually gain control. Like, you got your L3s, you're going to shoot, and gain turf. And then you're going to get to the basket, you're going to put a fuck ton of bubbles. Which actually, I was saying the other day, the one part of this comp that I actually like is the heavy deco. Because it actually makes sense. If the heavy deco synergizes with the rest of what's going on here, it's just that I don't like what's going on here. Because, yeah, okay, something that you guys need to... I keep hearing people say this, the idea of Armor Baller. Armor Baller is not the combo. Inkbrush Baller is the combo. The reason why Inkbrush Nouveau and Junior works together as a combination is because Inkbrush is a very good armor user, and it also has a baller. So on top of having the force multiplier of armor making Inkbrush even fucking harder to kill and even more obnoxious, it then also can conserve its baller for far longer, right? So if you think about the way an L3 fights, it's just kind of standing there or like hopping up and down, slowly moving side to side, painting a bit, and then whoever's fighting it, like, it's kind of... Fights between L3s and other weapons are generally determined by everything except whether or not, you know... It's... We saw this before. Like, the L3 wants to fight by kind of stalling the fight, slow fights, right? Where you, every time, the longer the fight goes for the L3, the more turf you're getting, closer to baller you're getting, etc. And pretty much then you take these slow fights, right? Problem is, slow fights suck in Clam Blitz. Clam Blitz is kind of... If you're going to pick Sploosh on a map, on a mode other than Rainmaker, it would probably be Clam Blitz. Because Clam Blitz, again, is kind of... It's a speed mode, remember? So the way that you get in is quite often from just opportunities where the other team slips up and you can just kind of get in and gain ground and sort of cheat map control, and then you defend that map control for a bit, and then your team comes in with clams. So, this comp, oh my gosh. I'm probably exaggerating just because I've just watched KP use this comp and lose with it over and over again, and I'm fucking sick of it, because it's just holding these guys back. Yeah, it's like... Armor, L3 is not the combo. Armor, Inkbrush is the combo. Because Armor synergizes with Inkbrush, and then the Baller also synergizes with the Inkbrush. Armor does not synergize with Baller. Okay? The idea of, like, the 2 health bar thing doesn't work with L3. L3 doesn't take fights where it's only taking, like, chip damage, like 1, 2, 3, 4 shots. It's if it's getting shot by something, like another L3, it's just going to take all that damage at once anyway. Like, the armor isn't going to fucking do anything. Is Junior even worthwhile in Clam Blitz? Yeah, sure. It's just not like this. This is not the combo you pick. Anyway. I'm sorry, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of seeing vanilla L3. Like, not only is vanilla L3 inferior to L3D in most cases, but L3 is generally a zones weapon. Most of the time you want K-Pro on like, tower control. K-Pro on tower control, you know, Rainmaker you want, like, T-Tech. And then Clams, again, you probably want something other than these. This, like, I describe this as sort of a tepid and cynical comp, and I just... It's... There's no sense, looking at this comp, of... Like, we know how we're gonna win. Right? There's no sense of, like... Like, this comp looks as though these guys have just been scrimming Astral the whole time. They've just kind of decided that they're sick of fighting ballers. Because, like, that's something about fighting the same team over and over again. Is if you, like, constantly fight against double L3, you're going to start thinking Baller's overpowered because the only thing you're ever going to see is Ballers. Because the only thing you're fighting is Ballers. Like, you're not actually seeing the entire game, you're just kind of repeatedly... anyway, I need to stop talking about this fucking team comp, and we just need to look at this game. Okay, so this game, I wanted to look at this game also because it's a kind of lead into all the things that makes Demise lose the finals. So...
yeah, we see L3 way too much now.
So you see straight away, like, what you're trying to do with the L3s here is to gain control. You're gaining control. You're not taking fights, you're gaining control by getting turf. And then, like, trying to use balls and whatnot. But the problem is that in Clam Blitz you do eventually have to capitalize on your fights and whatever. But we already established in the game we watched in Rainmaker, the Sayonara versus Astral game on Snapper, that L3, the way L3 fights is slow. It's deliberate and slow and control-oriented, and that's good for zones, but this is a fast mode, remember. You need to be able to instantly capitalize on the advantages that you're given, right? So, L3 in Clam Blitz doesn't make any sense for that reason. Because, yeah, you can, like, maybe you get your 3 burst or whatever, but chances are you're going to end up, if you're playing L3 correctly, you're getting into these slow, drawn-out fights. Now, I mentioned before that one of the best ways of pushing is to gradually gain control until you get in. But that gradual control gain isn't... like, you don't do that with the L3's playstyle. What you do is more like more like a Rainmaker playstyle almost, where you're like throwing bombs, you're throwing... you're trying to like instantaneously gain parts of the map so you get the clams there, and you move away. That kind of thing. And then you sort of gradually move toward the objective, and then you seize an opportunity to gain control of the basket, and then you pop all your resources around the basket, and then you hold the basket while the enemy team is like off balance. Right? And L3 doesn't really play like that. You can kind of play it like that. L3D can play like that because of the inkjet, but L3 vanilla is just ugh. I'm just going to turn this down. So you can sort of see here, like, there's nothing for the L3s to do to really slow this push down. Right? There's no bombs, there's no nothing. There's no, like, if you can sort of see, Kibber even tries to do it. He kind of, like, throws a curling bomb in the general direction of this push. So these guys are just barreling over mid. What do? They've got curling bombs. How the fuck do you stop a push with curling bombs? Oh, there's one bomb. That one bomb did actually slow tension down a little bit. Credit to Grey. But then there's just curling bombs after that. Like, what the hell are you doing? L3D is a lot better than vanilla because it has that sort of ability to switch gears, and the burst bomb makes it a lot more reliable of a weapon. So you can reliably assist across the map using the burst bombs. Like, look at this. This push is just like, okay, how does KP safely stop this push? They have to commit. They either need ballers or they have to commit. There's no bombs. And Zero's hopping up and down shooting Kyo, and Kyo is an L3, so of course he's going to miss some of his shots. And like, look at this. Kiva has to actually commit. There's no, like, stalling, there's no nothing. And then he finally gets baller, and yeah, he goes in, but then that's one and done. Luckily, Tension jumps in and dies. Like, you see what I mean about the Clam Blitz, right? About the defense there, right? Like, look at the way in which KP has to defend this push. So they're in. There's one bomb that's thrown. And it's like a curling bomb. And they're painting, sure, but there's no actual threat to anyone on Demise. They can just move around, go wherever they want, because all of the L3s have to actually commit. Like, they have to show their face in order to paint. So what happens is, Kiva, like, shows his face here, starts painting in this direction. Demise is like, oh, well, there's Kiva, let's just walk around here, because he's not over there. And then they walk over here, and they find Kaji. And then, so Kiva commits in, and then, oh, shit, DJ goes up through here, I think. And so on, and so on. It's just frustrating to watch this, because KP is a much better team, but their comps are just so poorly thought out, and have nothing to do with the way the mode is played, that it completely betrays their skill. So... Hey, so Zero's just gone in and kind of died, but it's fine. Most of his team is still up. Everyone's still getting clams. At this point, Demise is playing this perfectly. Almost. Aside from the fact that they now have 2 power clans. They probably didn't need that. So now is where we get to the part where I'm just very upset. So, there's this base race where KP goes in with a power clam, and DJ goes in with a power clam, except he's got a baller. Like, he's in a baller, so his power clam isn't going to make it to the basket in time. And then this just happens, and, like, they stay at the basket. Like, look, Zero's only just coming back. I don't know where DJ is. I think he had to jump back to spawn. So, something you got to understand about super jumps is super jumps are effectively the same thing as dying, except you keep your special, and you are back in the action about, 5 seconds sooner or something. You're still jumping back to the base. You're still starting from spawn. So, fucking up this badly and actually getting in and then having to jump all the way back, losing your power clam, you're effectively dying. Because instead of just the bad part of super jumping out, which is that you're effectively dying by going back to spawn, it's also the fact that you wasted, like, 10 seconds over there in the first place. You actually... Kraken Paradise is just chilling under the basket here, just being like, where are you? Like, we've got a bunch of clams, nobody's in mid, everyone's just jumped back from the basket back to... Like, they waited so long because he was in a baller. Like, DJ went in with a baller. He had a power clam, and he had a baller, and he went in. And then he had to explode the baller, and then he had to pick up the power clam, and then he turns around and realizes, oh shit, the basket's not there. And then he's like, shit, what do I do? And then he's like, do I swim back? Do I jump out? Shit. And then he jumps out, and then... I don't know. I'll hang on. We can check. So DJ's going in. Kyo... Oh, actually, that's right. Yeah, now I remember. Kyo actually gets the kill. Maybe it's Kiva who gets the kill. I remember someone gets the kill. Yeah, Kiva gets the kill because I actually remember seeing it on the stream. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. Either way, it's like, okay, he dies. Like, regardless, the point is, regardless of whether he jumps out or dies, he's fucked. Like, that just completely threw the game. So, what I'm essentially saying is, well, this is Clam Blitz for a start. I really don't like KP's comp, but that doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what KP's doing wrong if Demise just gives them a win. Which I think is a really good way of introducing the Grand Finals of the Crown. Because, for those of you who weren't here earlier, in my opinion, the Grand Finals of the Crown were basically 13 games, of which Demise won 6, lost 6, and then Astral kind of shithoused their way to 1 win. So, if you were to put a score up, I think that the real score for the finals is something more like Demise 6, but then also Demise -6, and then Astral 1, for a grand total of Astral 1-0 Demise. That's your grand final score, as far as I'm concerned. And we'll take a look at it. We're going to look at the -6. I don't really... we can look through all the games that that Demise loses, but this was an extremely one-sided game, grand finals. Demise was playing better in almost all the time in all the games. They just gave wins to Astral, half their wins.